across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Let's speak straight away now to Mamas Nudge Me, who's a writer and commentator, an apostate. He was once a Muslim, now he's not. He's a very dear friend of mine, a very sensible man indeed. Mamas, Kemi Badenoch is here saying, I've got the solution to the whole debate about the burqa, which has suddenly cropped back up. Workplaces can decide whether or not they're comfortable with staff wearing burqas. And my thoughts about this is, how many career women out there are wearing burqas anyway?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because she said organizations should be able to decide what their staff wear. It shouldn't be something that people should be able to override. Now, this sounds to me like a person without a plan, just reacting only in that instance to get public popularity. As we know, Tories are desperate to get that. I mean, you won't see them in public spaces, or not public spaces, or in offices anyway. So it should really be about a face covering ban, and then you can't really have a face covering ban unless you leave the ECHR and you leave the human rights, because there will be exemptions, and those exemptions will be religious exemptions. So it's sort of like you can't just create new policies and new laws unless you have dealt with the overriding law, which is the human rights law, which allows for these insidious things to happen in the first place.
So talk to me about the burqa, because yesterday I was speaking to the former head of the Muslim Association of the Conservative Party, and he basically said, look, I'm a Muslim, I don't know anyone who wears the burqa. Frankly, it's just daft. It doesn't harm anybody. I kind of feel it's more pernicious than that, and I want to know what your take is. You were a Muslim. When you see women in burqas, is this because they choose to do it? Is this just part of very conservative Islamic practice? Is it deliberately trolling the West? I mean, where would you stand on this?
I mean, okay, let's first address that it is both burqa and niqab that is under objections, because we are using burqa as a shorthand, because many people have come out in a predictable, pedantic fashion to point out the differences. The burqa is the full covering, or shuttlecocks as we used to call them, and the niqabs are the black ones which have eye slits, right? And we have an interesting name for that as well. So people need to stop getting stuck in semantics, first of all, over it anyways. So the Islamic teachings is not just the Quran and the Hadiths. It's also the Sharia that has been developed from the ijma of these Islamic scholars. And over there, these are the prescribed guidelines. These are the things that you should do. The covering of the hair, covering of the face is not really one of the things. But what happens is, once you allow a certain demographic to take hold, and do not push back on their religious practices, which is conservative and backward, even in the countries like Saudi Arabia that we are exalting recently, and UAE and stuff, their women do that as well. They also use niqabs and certain sort of face or head covering as well. So once you let these demographics take hold and their religious practices take hold, the voices of those like that Muslim MP, who's probably a liberal moderate MP, they do not matter anymore, because what overrides is what the Islam actually teaches. So they themselves become a minority themselves, right? So in the future, if we don't deal with this demographic problem, which is the main problem actually, people are talking about the burqa bans or the halal slaughter and stuff. Yeah, we should not even be having those debates. We should not even be having to put those things into law to ban. We should actually be making sure our demographics and religious demographics is as such that it is not required. Right? And that is the core problem over here.
I mean, I always regard this as the thin end of a wedge, really. As a woman, I don't like what the burqa represents. Even if a woman says, I've chosen to wear it, I kind of think it's because she's been brought up being told that not wearing it is shameful. And it's that thinking about women walking down the street who aren't veiled or covered as being shameful or being, less than animals in the eyes of Muslim men that led to things like the rape gangs. It is that sort of misogyny. It is that view of Western women and about this idea that women are sirens and temptresses, and actually it's their responsibility to cover all of their flesh so men can don't have to control their urges, that I think is so injurious and has no place in our society. And for that reason alone, I would say that burqa needs to be banned. But there's something about this country that when it comes to tackling, defending our culture and actually saying to whichever other religion, that won't fly here, that's not the way we do things, feel free to practice privately in your own home, that's your kingdom, you can do what you like. But when you are out there in society, this is the way we do things, this is our belief systems, these are the rules by which we live. You can either follow these rules or go back to a country that has different rules that you're more comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think so that used to happen when when Britain had a monoculture or a stronger culture that everyone followed or had to follow, right? They weren't pandering to anyone else. So I would say, like, yes, ban the burqa, ban the niqab, ban the halal slaughter, like, you know, all of these sort of things. But let's keep our focus on tackling the issue deeper, so that we don't have people in this country who would wear it in the first place, enforce it upon the women of their household, or advocate for such prehistoric delusions, right? So that is a core problem over here. And when people say it's like it's woman's choice, it's not woman's choice to begin with. If you start giving burqas and putting burqas and niqabs on kids, right, when they're little girls and stuff, so obviously that's something as a social signifier that they'll get used to. And if they don't do it, then they also have this fear that they'll be ostracized from their community, their certain communities and stuff. And that fear of ostracization is a main reason why most moderate Muslims don't become ex-Muslims, right? They don't become apostates, because they fear that loss of connection and stuff. So there's a lot of coercion going on which is enabled by the religion itself. And it's not Islamism, it's Islam itself, the core religion itself, and then enabled by the men of that religion because they want control, right? So here we have a religion which is, in its truest sense, a very misogynistic religion, right? And then we have all these lovely lefties who pretend to care about women's rights and stuff, advocating for hijabs and burqas and all of those things under like, oh, it's a woman's choice. I mean, it's as much as a woman's choice as to change their gender. If you're going to indoctrinate people with these sort of things, you are, you know, I don't want to take the agency of women away from those who actually want to do it and who are religious in that sense, who are motivated themselves to do it. But the basis is that's their problem. We should not be having this problem over here. And we should not be even having to build these laws over here, because as Pedronok herself pointed out, that these things have happened in France. Like this ban is there in France, but it hasn't helped race relations of their cultural issues, right? They have gone even worse and worse. So these punitive laws, like, they are there, we can use them, but what are we actually doing? Because we are furthering the difference of ourselves from what we were before, right? So we are creating an authoritarian state. We're looking at places like UAE, and, you know, some Sheikh Ibn whatever will come on and say, oh, look, we don't have any extremism in UAE. It's the UK that has the extremism over there. So and that is an insidious thing itself, I would say, because what they're advocating for is you should give up your Western ideals and stuff and take our authoritarian laws, and that's the only way that you can deal with, extremism, Islam or Islamism or whatever. And I would say, like, no, like, that's a bit of distraction. I think so we should be comfortable in exercising a bit of exclusion in this country and, you know, coming back to a culture that is what is true to this country. And people who don't like it, we need to start building ways to, send them on their merry way.
Yeah, I think I always think it comes down to sort of a deterrent. You know, we're not going to tolerate all these things that you insist that you've got to have, so therefore don't live in this country. It's not about persecuting people. It's not about banning people from private religious beliefs. It's about saying these are our national values and we're going to unapologetically adhere to them. And if you find that a problem, well, you know where the door is. I think It's all very simple. Momus, it's always wonderful talking to you. Thank you ever so much for your candour, as always. Right, now, if you want to have a